just going to revisit some oldies.
Just a broken record. Greatest hits.
Are we ready? Well, thank you all for joining us. We had to get back to session yesterday when the governor and Senator Bach did their press availability after our meeting. We had a great meeting, and there was no disagreement, and that's had nothing to do with why we left. We just had to get back to the floor. So we wanted to do some press today and just visit with you about where we're at and the progress that we're making. The governor said yesterday that he is going to spend the weekend drafting his first offer to us this session on transportation. We strongly urge him to remember his own words from December, that a gas tax is dead. The only movement that we've seen really so far is Democrats moving farther away from the position where we left off last year. And I think Minnesotans expect us to fund roads and bridges this session. That is our #1 priority. Democrats say it is their #1 priority. And frankly, we have the resources to do it. So we encourage the governor to bring us an offer on Monday that does not include the gas tax. We had expressed to the press earlier in the week, this week that, or last week, that the Senate's offer to be considered serious needed to not include a gas tax. They really didn't move from their gas tax position. So Minnesotans expect us to fund our roads and bridges, and they've asked us to do that without taking more money from their budgets. And I think that we owe it to them to do that. We have a $900 million surplus, and frankly, we think that if it's your #1 priority, we should use the money that Minnesotans have already given us to fund what they expect us to fund. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joyce Pepin.
Thank you. I would just like to add to it, and regarding the gas tax, I'd just like to remind everyone that we actually had a vote on the gas tax last year, and it got 0 votes. And so to continue to talk about the gas tax is an exercise in futility. And all the caucuses promised the state of Minnesota that we'd fix the roads and bridges. So I certainly hope that the Democrats will put forward a plan that puts the people of Minnesota in the driver's seat, and that it funds roads and bridges throughout the state of Minnesota, and that they don't stand in a way by insisting on additional trains in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that's our hope, and we'll continue to work on our plan going forward, and so we hope that the governor will put forward an offer that we can all live with.
I guess just one point as to where we're at today, and I think you've all been around here long enough to know that we're at the last week of session. This is where we are at. You've seen an offer and a counter offer. We are very excited, if I can speak for Senator Dibble and myself, as chairs of the transportation committees, that our leadership, Speaker Daudt, Senator Bach, and the governor have expressed that transportation is priority one, and we will put a package together. So I don't think there's a lot of reason to be too concerned that that's going to get done. We have spoken very succinctly and honestly as to where the lines in the sand are at, and I don't think it's going to be any big surprise to people when we see that there not going to be a gas tax, and that we will have transit as part of our comprehensive transportation package. And so I think this is just where we are at today, and we look forward to putting the package together.
Questions?
I see some members missing. Is that just coincidence?
There's a whole bunch standing behind you too, Rachel, that maybe you're not seeing.
I look backwards.
Our, I wanted to. We just came from caucus. I wanted to make sure that folks understood that our team is standing together. We don't have a vote for a gas tax. In fact, as Leader Pepin said just a moment ago, we took a vote last year and not a single Democrat in the House voted for a gas tax increase either. So I think it's time to really get down to business and do what Minnesotans expect. And frankly, if I need to be the adult in the room and keep reminding everybody that let's start where we left off last year. That's the way to make a productive amount of progress as we work towards the goal that everybody is talking about being their #1 priority. So we thought it was important. I invited the whole team here so you could see that we do stand together, and we want to remind the governor that let's hold him to his own words. And you can see right here what the governor said last year. This was November or December 1st, I think, of last year. A gas tax increase is dead. And that's the premise that we've all been working off of since that time. In fact, I made that declaration last February. The governor joined me in that last November. We had agreement on that issue, and now they're back talking about a gas tax. We do have a $900 million surplus. We have the resources to fund the road and bridge infrastructure in the state of Minnesota at an adequate level, and we can do it without taking more money out of Minnesotans' pockets.
The reference to Metro trains kind of creates the impression that the gas tax would go for trains, and as I understand it, it wouldn't. So you're also against the quarter-cent local option sales tax for the counties? Is that what that's about?
You know, we have been clear all along that we're not supportive of Southwest Light Rail. We don't think it's an effective and efficient way of using our resources. We've also been saying we're willing to talk to Democrats. If they feel like that's a priority, they need to convince us, just like they need to convince the public. The problem with their stances right now is the public's against them on a gas tax, and the public is against them on Southwest Light Rail. These two initiatives do not have broad public support. So we feel like we're the ones here representing middle-class Minnesotans and protecting them from government just taking more money from them to pay for things that we already have the money to pay for. Ours is what we think is a very logical position, and we think it's where Minnesotans are at. And that's why we take those positions.
The corporate CEOs didn't move you. Their letter in the Strip.
You know, I wouldn't read too much into their letter. It didn't say, you know, I think the headline didn't even represent what the letter said, but I've talked with them. I think they would like to see a transportation deal done. I think they feel like transit would need to be part of that according to the position the Democrats have staked out. But I think, you know, our priority is where Minnesotans are at, and that's funding our road and bridge infrastructure. And if Democrats want additional money for trains, they need to convince us and they need to convince the public that those things are necessary.
Transportation is the linchpin of any deal. I mean, what happens if the proposal includes a gas tax? I mean, does it all just fall apart then?
Well, we will just have made no progress again, and that's why we're calling on the governor today. Let's get back to where we left off last year when you said a gas tax was dead. It doesn't serve Minnesotans well to be changing our position every few months, and we've made less progress. We've gone backwards because Democrats have moved further away from our position, not closer together. So I just want to get them back to where they left off last year as a starting point, and then let's talk. We're more than willing to be open and flexible, and we'll together, and I'm optimistic that we'll put together a transportation plan that will fund roads and bridges in the state.
The chairman keeps saying that transit will be part of this transportation bill.
Who keeps saying that?
The guy behind you, the
Oh.
chairman.
Have
you met?
I'll let him answer.
But how does that look? How do you do that? Are you talking about a little transit, a lot of transit?
Well, thanks, Don. The issue I think that we've been battling is that whenever we talk about transportation and we talk about the gas tax, we talk about transit, it seems to focus on one project and one issue, and that's the light rail. Transit, as we have worked very diligently in both the Senate and the House, means so much more. We have to understand that, and that's how the plan has to come together. So transit in the metro area, we have to understand what that means from an outstate perspective, just as the metro area needs to understand what roads and bridges means to the outstate. So that's, in understanding that definition of transit, that's why we say transit, we completely agree it has to be part of the total package.
And will the rural members support money for Twin Cities Transit?
I believe our caucus will support a comprehensive long-term transportation package.
Including transit funds?
That includes transit.
So regarding this, I mean, first of all, I think everybody knows that 98% of people, or some ridiculously high number of people, travel via some type of automobile, and the transit portion is a very, very small percentage. So we just want to, lay it out there that, the Democrats can't continue to hold improvements to road and bridge funding throughout the state, throughout all the suburbs and greater Minnesota, because of their desire to have a light rail project. So I would say that's kind of number one. And the second thing regarding transit, whenever people think about transit, or whenever they talk about it in the other caucuses, they talk about it in terms of trains, but transit can also mean buses as well. And I think that's something that we're definitely very open to talking about, how buses can work as well for a transit option. So, we really hope that the the Democrats won't hold up what we need to get done and what we all agree on is roads and bridges throughout the state. The governor yesterday talked about the roads and bridges throughout the state of Minnesota needing funding, and so first and foremost, we have to get that done. And so I truly hope that the Senate leadership and the governor will come to terms with the fact that the roads and bridges throughout the state of Minnesota, whether it be the suburbs or through the four corners of the state, we need to make progress on roads and bridges. And yes, we can talk about transit, but it's not just about the Southwest Light Rail that's very unpopular. It's also about buses and things like that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I also, just one minute, I want to add too that, you know, our job right now as the leaders, the governor, Senator Bach, and myself, is to set joint targets so that these conference committee members can get to work. Our job is not to negotiate every detail of every bill. And the first step that we need to do is decide how much of that $900 million surplus are we all willing to spend on our number one priority, which is funding roads and bridges in the state of Minnesota. So that's the first question that needs to be answered. And we want to get that out of the way probably on Monday so that we can respect the legislative process, respect the legislators who have worked so hard and sat through so many hours of committee taking testimony on all of these important issues. We want to respect them to work together to come up with the final bills. And there's going to have to be some give and take on both sides, I assure you. But we need that to happen. And Senator Bach and myself have both been vocal publicly about that process needing to take place with the inclusion of the members of the legislature in the conference committee process. So my hope is that we'll set that target on Monday. Once we set that target, I think the others will fall into place fairly easily, and we can get all the conference committees working and get this wrapped up successfully and on time.
Speaker, understanding this is a pivot in the conversation, but any reaction to the letter from the DOJ yesterday to the school districts across the country, including the Minnesota, regarding the transgender bathroom policies?
You know, I haven't reviewed that letter, but you know, I don't think any decision that comes from federal government dictating to what each school must do is probably a good idea. I think we should probably leave those decisions up to our school districts, but I haven't reviewed the letter.
From some of the members, the speaker earlier said that he's sounded confident that something will get done. What are you hearing from your local constituents, and do you think something will get done?
Dave?
Anyone?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm one of the freshmen, one of the new guys here, Dave Baker from Kansas County. Again, I just want to stand in complete support of now is not the time for a gas tax. I've been very clear about that. I've shared numbers. We're already paying 47 cents a gallon for every gallon of gasoline that we purchase today. I think a lot of Minnesotans don't even know that. Between federal and state taxes, it's 47 cents. I think it's enough, but there's other ways to find long-term planning and funding. I think this is a good thing to do. So again, I stand very, very firm with my caucus and look forward to getting something done without a gas tax.
Are you confident something will get done?
I'm very confident something will get done.
And what happens if it doesn't?
It's going
to get done.
It's going to, Rachel. Excuse me, Jim.
See, I'll just give you an update in terms of the Supplemental Finance Conference Committee. We've had 3 meetings this week. Senator Cohen and the senators and myself, co-chair of the Supplemental Finance Committee, and our House members have met late, I think till 10:30 at least, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. Senator Cohen and I met late last night. We've had other individual chairs meeting about policy language. I'm expecting that we're going to be meeting again sometime this weekend, likely Sunday, but I've got to confer a little bit more with Senator Cohen. And I think we're making good progress on our bills, which, you know, contain basically 8 of the big supplemental finance conference committees, and I'm confident that we will have a good product in the end.
Mr. Speaker, is there any way that this can proceed without having the transportation piece resolved?
Well, you know what, our number one priority is funding the road and bridge infrastructure in the state. We have a $900 million surplus. Obviously, we feel like at least a portion, if not a large portion of that $900 million surplus should be invested in what we believe is our number one priority. We also believe that we need some tax relief. We believe that there's some things in the tax code that we can fix that'll help out middle-class Minnesotans and really make a meaningful difference in their lives. So we have those priorities. We have talked about those consistently over the last year. I'll remind folks, too, that when we left last year, we left without accomplishing a tax bill and a transportation bill for one sole reason. Representative Bach made it very clear that if we weren't willing to increase the gas tax at that time, that there would not be a tax bill and there would not be a long-term transportation funding package. My hope is that he's softened on that. And my response to him when he made that statement in the meeting at the governor's residence was, well, that's fine. We're going to have to leave that unfinished for this session. And that's why we left the $1 billion of money unspent on the bottom line. And of course, we went into special session. We spent a little more on K-12 education. But we're in almost exactly the same position today that we were then. We have a fully funded state budget. We put really records amount of money into places like nursing homes, things that were priorities for our members. We put a record amount of money, or at least I think what amounts to a 10-year high amount of funding into our K-12 education system. So we have already represented those priorities. And I think we owe it to Minnesotans now to focus on the parts of that were left undone last session. And that would be a road and bridge funding package and a tax bill that would provide some meaningful relief to Minnesotans.
If you can't get a transportation bill done, then do you proceed with bonding and do you proceed with a supplemental budget, or just?
We'll have those conversations. It's really tough to set the targets for the other budget areas without knowing. If transportation and roads and bridges are really our #1 priority, you kind of need to decide how much of that $900 million surplus you want to put towards your #1 priority. We are saying, I think in the bill that we put out earlier this week, that we'd like to take $300 million of the $900 million and spend it on roads and bridges, in addition to some other funding that we have in our plan. The governor and Senator Bach are still at zero. They want to spend zero of the resources available on their #1 priority. That's the part that we need to see some movement on.
And how soon will we see your bonding bill? Is it going to be after this next attempt at trying to put together a transportation package? Does the transport have to be done before we see your bonding, or where?
You will see it in the next week. that I can assure you. But I'll also remind you, too, that we came out with a target of $600 million. That's slightly below what we budgeted last year. But as soon as we did that, Representative Thiessen came out and said that a $600 million bonding bill would get 0 DFL votes in the House, regardless of the content that's in the bill. They didn't care about what was in the bill. They just weren't going to put up any votes for a $600 million bill. So it doesn't do much good for us to talk about what's in a bill when they don't care what's in the bill. I'll also remind you that a year ago, we passed a state budget that took into account a debt service that would cover about $800 million of bonding this year. The governor then proceeded to put out a bonding proposal of $1.4 billion, the Senate Democrats of $1.8 billion. We need to come to a reasonable position, and if we know that 1.8 is obviously too high, it didn't have enough votes to pass the Senate. 600 million apparently, according to the House DFL, is too low. Let's figure out and set the target for debt service, and then let's actually work together to find a bill that will pass. And I think that's what Minnesotans expect us to do in St. Paul, is work together. The governor said in the meeting yesterday that he wanted to take the weekend and put together a compromise position. And I said, well, that sounds great. Let's get all of the people from all of the sides together in a room over the weekend and let them work towards a compromise position. He said, no. I'd like to come up with my own compromise position. Well, that's great. That means we're going to see our first offer of this session from the governor on Monday on transportation, and we hope that it is closer to our position and not continuing to be further away from our position and even his own position from last year. But we wish that he would have taken up our offer to actually work together over the weekend, but he declined that. So we hope that they can make some progress and come up with an offer. And really, again, the bottom line here is his offer on Monday needs to not include a gas tax to be considered serious.
On the process.
Bonding, you had said that you didn't release it because Thiessen said he wouldn't vote for it.
Right.
So at what point did you stop working on that bonding bill? Was it the day that you announced $600 million? Because that's the day he first said it.
I think that they have continued to work on that bill since the day we gavelled in over a year ago. And Sheriff Torkelson has done a good job reviewing the projects. He's worked across the aisle and worked with Democrats, and I'm confident that he will work with the Hausman, the lead on the DFL side, to come up with a bill that will have enough votes to pass the legislature.
Have a $600 million bill prepared, as you
I
said,
think
on
that
Monday?
we had proposals that we would put into a $600 million bill, but I think we, decided not to put out a bill when they said it didn't matter what was in it. So
You didn't finish the work on the bill,
I
as
don't know
you
what
said
finish
Monday.
the work means. Finishing the
You
work to
said
me,
you-
finishing the work to me, Rachel, is passing a bill on the House floor, and we can't pass a bill on the House floor because House Republicans, House Democrats said that they wouldn't put up a single vote for a $600 million bill. So we can't finish the work on a bonding bill because Democrats are unwilling to even look at what's in the bill. They declared they wouldn't vote for it before they even saw it.
Last question, you gotta get the House
How much of that, the transportation bill that you guys have going, how much of that is ongoing with tails versus just one time, would you say, just ballpark figure?
Well, I think, I'll let the chairman also answer, but I think our bill adds up to a little over $6 billion over 10 years. It uses $300 million of general fund this biennium, and I think a little over $600 million in the tails, but I'll let him answer too.
Well, the speaker is exactly right. The sales tax on auto parts, lease sales tax, rental tax amounts to about $300 million per year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.